did you think about the exam? You think it was too easy? You think it was too hard? Well, it wasn't too hard for you, but do you think it was about right?
Yeah, I think it, well, you had said in the beginning that everything on the test was going to be from the classes, so it was all there. The notes helped a lot. I was dreading that you were going to talk about how to help a couple who was showing the Four Horsemen already.
Oh.
So I kind of emphasized a little bit on that, and it wasn't on there, which is okay. But I thought it was going to be longer.
Well, you know,
like twice to make sure that it
we only have an hour.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And in this class, there are varying education levels,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to leave anybody behind. I don't want to, you know, I want it to be challenging, but I don't want it to be
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
challenging.
I mean, this was good. It really helped out to go through the midterm the week before like we did.
Yeah.
And I can see how it could get to be too much. Though. I could get how easy it could be too hard. Because there's a lot of definitions, there's a lot of...
Well, some of it is hard to define.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's like the terms that we were going over for cognitive behavioral therapy, the thinking errors.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are kind of hard to define.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
easier to recognize than to reproduce and
Yeah.
define. So
To put a label on it.
yeah,
I know some of this stuff I learned here, I go through and I talk to my wife about it or some of my other family about it. And I find that I feel like I understand it easier than I can explain it.
Yeah.
But I want to understand it to the point where I can explain it.
right.
You know, so it does take, I think a lot of the times if I give them like a certain label, like let's say emotional reasoning, I'm able to define it as this says, but they're not able to apply it to themselves. So I kind of have to find a situation that I know they've been in,
Yeah.
and then show them this is what you were doing. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. That's an important one. That's a really important one. Now, do you have your paper?
Yes. The book review?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was awesome. It's a great book.
It really is. I didn't have to read that book for my degree. My degree was in community counseling, so we didn't really have to do anything on couples, which I wish we had because, as family life chaplains, we deal a lot with couples. You know,
What does community counseling entail?
it's more individual counseling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's going to be 5 fruit jobs coming out of that trailer tomorrow.
So you don't have your paper?
Technically, I do. Wait, send this back.
It's in the USB.
It's right here.
Okay.
That's why I said there might be 5 copies coming out tomorrow. I should just
Okay.
text Deborah and see, the secret to how to work that.
There's a lesson to be learned for that.
I should have emailed it.
Don't put it off until the last minute.
Yeah.
Okay. But email it to me, okay?
I should.
So it's not late. Email it to me.
I can email
Okay.
it.
Well, we've already gone over the midterm, and we just did.
Yeah, that was good.
So let's kind of start with something that I want you to be aware of. It has nothing to do with our class. This is in the chaplaincy we call it free chicken. It's just like a bonus. Today I was at home. I was studying, and a Jehovah's Witness lady came to the door, and I've been noticing them going through the neighborhoods. Now they're always out knocking on doors because they have to earn their salvation. They have to record all the time that they put in, and it's reviewed by the elders. But right around this time, they have a communion service. It's sort of a non-communion service. They only take communion once a year, but cup, they have, I don't know if they have wine, literal wine or grape juice, it really doesn't matter because nobody drinks it, and the bread, and they pass it. Nobody takes it. The reason for that is only the 144,000 are allowed to take the bread and the wine, to take communion. When the Watchtower started, started by Charles Taze Russell, who was the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Before they were even called Jehovah's Witnesses, they were called the Bible students back then. And initially, everybody was supposedly a member of the 144,000, Revelation 7 and Revelation 14. Okay, so somebody started doing the numbers. Now, I think it's around the 20s, 1920s. Guess what?
Yeah, a ton of members.
They had over 144,000. So they had to come up with something. So they came up with the other sheep doctrine. So the vast majority of the millions of Jehovah's Witnesses are considered the other sheep. The other sheep never go to heaven. Only the 144,000 go to heaven.
So what's the point?
Yes. It's an empty,
It's a lottery.
it's an empty ritual. When they all come together, I was in a documentary in the 80s, my wife and I, we were in for that scene. We were in the front row and we looked like Jehovah's Witnesses passing a plate, nobody takes it. It's an empty ritual. And they did it because they painted themselves into a corner with their false doctrine.
Wow.
Now, this lady came to my door today, and she invited me and said they want to invite people to come to this. But it's kind of silly
Yeah.
because nobody takes it. She said, I said, does anybody take communion in your Kingdom Hall? She goes, no, but I heard about this one a few years ago that did. And the way this works, okay, so if you were alive in 1914, you'd be 105 now, you know? So that generation that was there prior to 1914 has all died off. So,
144 is already.
yeah. So the way that they try to explain this is that, well, one of those original members of the 144,000 had sinned in some way. They didn't make it. They didn't make the cut. So someone else gets added as a part of the 144,000. The way they determine whether you are a candidate or not is that they describe you Paradise Earth. And they show you the pictures, and they show, you know, like in the Millennial Kingdom, you show the angel, the animals and lions with the people, little kids, so peaceful. And they say to the person when they come and knock on their door, say, doesn't this look nice? Doesn't this look peaceful? And if the person says yes, you're not part of 144,000, because 144,000 don't want to have this earthly hope. They want to go to heaven. So that's kind of how it's done.
Wow.
And I said to her, the 144,000, and I kind of went over that, and I said, the 144,000 are all Jews. And it lists the tribes. And in chapter 14, it says they're all men. And they're all virgins. All men. Yeah. In Revelation chapter 7, starting in verse 1, after this I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind should blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. Skipping down to verse 4, and I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Okay, so the 144,000 are all sons of Israel. These are all little Jews.
So is it like a literal 144,000?
Yeah.
Or is it figurative?
No, it's
Or
literal.
does it pertain to a certain?
No, it's literal. 144,000, and then it lists the tribes. Verse 5, from the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Simeon, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. From the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. These are literal Jews.
So he gave one from each of the 12 tribes, or 12 from each of the 12 tribes.
Well, one of the tribes is left out. Dan. Dan, the tribe of Dan's left out. And Joseph is included. Now Joseph's sons are half tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. No. I don't know why. I don't know why that Joseph, his inheritance went to his sons, half tribes. But Dan is left out. Now, we're not told why Dan is left out. I've had Jehovah's Witnesses say to me, well, that's because Dan's left out. It means it's figurative. No, it doesn't. So why is Dan left out? I surmised once, and I was wrong about this, that maybe Dan got wiped out. You know? Perhaps the descendants of Dan, and no Jews really know what tribes they're from. All the records were destroyed in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. And they were dispersed, so no Jews really know. They will know in the tribulation, because there's going to be new revelation in the tribulation. But I thought, well, maybe Dan might have been in Germany. Maybe they might have been congregated in Poland. There's 3 million people that were killed in Poland. 3 million Jews. Germany, something like that, you know? And I said that in a Sunday school class, and it was a very sharp Sunday school class. And someone said, well, they're mentioned in the millennial kingdom as having the redistribution of the land. Oh, I was wrong about that. But another explanation, and I think this one is correct, I was wrong the first time. When you look at the history of the Old Testament, when the Jews were, they had this cycle where when things were going bad, they would turn back to Yahweh. You know, they would repent. But when things were going good, they wanted to go out and flirt with the Baals and the Astaroth and the pagan gods and everything that's in the world, which is pagan religion. And then God brought judgment. Typically, the tribe that was always kind of the first to say, let's go see what Baal's doing. Guess who they were? Dan. So it could be that Dan is left out of this very special ministry of the 144,000. Now, the purpose of the 144,000, they're going to be like 144,000 Apostle Pauls. Wow. They have the seal of God on their foreheads. The Antichrist is going to, you know who the tribulation saints are. Tribulation saints are those who are killed in the tribulation. Believers that are killed in the tribulation. The Antichrist isn't going to be able to get the 144,000. They slip through his fingers, and they're going to spread the gospel to the whole world. Now it gives us some more information about them in chapter 14, starting in verse 1. And I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures. Who are the 4 living creatures? Yep, right, the seraphim. Seraphim, yeah. And the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. verse 4, these are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as the first fruits of God and to the Lamb, and no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. So from 14 and 7, we know that they are literal Jews, sons of Israel. It lists their tribes. It's not talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. And they're all men, and they're all virgins. So I always kind of picture them as young men, but I guess that's sort of an assumption. Anyway, so I just wanted to bounce that off you. If they come and they knock on your door, talk to them about it, because they need to be confronted about this, because they don't know. I'll say this last thing and we'll get into our lesson. My mentor, Dr. Peter Barnes, had been a Jehovah's Witness for 30 years, from the time he was 20 until the time he was 50. And on the second Saturday in May in 1978, he became a Christian. And he became a Christian by prayerfully and carefully reading through the Bible on his own. And after he got saved, the Lord laid it on his heart to try to help other Jehovah's Witnesses and to confront this cult. Here's a picture of Peter and I. He's with the Lord now. He's been gone about 8 years.
It's almost Amish.
So Peter said, he's English. Yeah, he's from London. He said that when he was a Jehovah's Witness, he can count on the fingers of his two hands the times that Christians made an effort to defend their faith at the door.
Wow.
He said sometimes it was just one verse, but 10 times. Now he said that he estimated during that 30 years that he knocked on over 70,000 doors. 70,000 doors. And only 10 times. But he said, I never forgot what those people said. I never forgot what they said. Now there were a few that did make a pretty good defense of their faith. But he said, and I didn't have an answer for them. I was a well-trained Jehovah's Witness. I didn't have an answer for them.
So, what is a good opening scripture to
I think the best one is John chapter 20 and verses 24 through 29. Because one of the things that all false teaching teaches, cults, they all teach that what they teach is what the disciples believed. And what we believe are distortions that came into the church later, but they believe what the disciples believed. All the cults deny the deity of Christ, one way or another. And the reason they do that is, if you have the true Christ, you have the truth. Everything stems from him. And so they distort and twist the person of Jesus Christ, one way or another. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus is an angel. He's Michael the Archangel. He's created. He's inferior to God. The Mormons believe that Jesus is one of many gods, and they believe they can become gods, and that Jesus and Lucifer are spirit brothers.
Yeah.
He's created. He's inferior to God. So, in John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29, verse 28, where Thomas says to Jesus, "You are my Lord and my God," and in verse 29, Jesus accepts that.
Yeah.
And actually says, "It's about time, Thomas." But in verse 28, Thomas says to him, "You are my Lord and my God." Capital L, capital G. And in the Greek, it's even stronger. In the word for word Greek, it would be, "You are the Lord of me and the God of me."
Wow.
It's a genitive of possession. There's no stronger way that Thomas could have said in the Greek language that you are my Lord and my God. And Jesus comes. So that's the one. If I had only one scripture, it would be that one. Because their answers are so weak. and they can see it too. Now, I'll just bounce off the answers quickly. The one I hear most from, say, Jehovah's Witness elders would be, well, Thomas was shocked, and he was surprised. And he said, like what a lot of people do when they're shocked or surprised, oh my God.
Right. But that wasn't the same thing.
I know, right?
No. If you walked around saying that back then, when you were surprised by stuff, you would be surprised by something round and hard. They would stone you for that.
Yeah.
That's blasphemy. Yeah. Another one that they'll say is, well, Thomas said to Jesus, my Lord, and then he looked up into heaven and said, my God, to Jehovah. Well, if you read the text and it doesn't say that.
Right.
He said to him, which is Jesus, my Lord and my God. That and is a coordinating conjunction. Yeah. It's the same, it works the same way in the Greek as it does in the English. And in the Greek it's even stronger because it has the same ending. It has genitive of possession endings. There's no way you could separate it. And what you say to them is, you know what? You're reading into the Bible because it doesn't say that. You're inserting all this extra stuff and it doesn't say that. Another one would be, well, Thomas was wrong. I mean, this is doubting Thomas after all. He was wrong. So he made a mistake. If Thomas had made a mistake in calling Jesus his God, what would Jesus have done? Yeah, he would have corrected him. And the last one, this one takes a little bit of explanation. We'll say, well, you got to look at the context. And they don't even want to look at verses 28 and 29 because they know how damaging that is for them. They say, no, you got to look at the context. In verses 30 and 31, many other signs, therefore, Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So they'll say, see, Jesus isn't God, he's the Son of God.
Will they use that as a scripture?
Okay, now the title Son of God, as defined in Scripture, means equal with God.
Yeah.
In John chapter 5, in verses 17 and 18, I talked to that lady about this today. The way the Bible defines the title Son of God, it means equal with God, and this is where it's defined. In verse 17 of John 5, but he answered them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this cause, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. The title Son of God means equal with God. Now, Jesus had been healing on the Sabbath, and so some of the Jews were very upset at him for that, and they were talking about killing him, and Jesus answers them this way, my Father works on the Sabbath, and so do I. And then in verse 18, John tells us exactly what he meant, equal with God. So when Jesus is called God, all throughout the Bible, like in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And in verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. God was the one God from the Father, full of grace and truth. When he's called the Son of God, that means he's God. Okay. All right, now let's get to our lesson tonight.
I usually tell them, don't leave me your flyers, I'm sending them away, so I know it's spend good money.
Well, but see, these are people that are lost, and they don't know any better. And unless we talk to them, one of the things you can do when they come and knock on your door is say, hey, now's not a good time, but let me get your phone number, and I'll call you, and we'll set up a time, and you can come, say next week, and let me check my schedule. I'll call you, and if you want to come over and talk, we'll talk. And then call me. So call me and we'll arrange a time, and I'll sit down and talk to them with you, and you don't have to say anything. Just watch me, and all the pressure's off of you, and learn from that. Now that's something that Peter did for me, and that was a great experience. Too often we hear evangelists and we hear people in apologetics, and they tell you what to say, but when it comes to them actually showing you how it's done, they're not there. When I saw Peter do this, I not only learned what to say, but how to say it, and how to control the conversation. And it gave me a lot of confidence because I saw how it was done. So hold on to my number. Hopefully I'll continue teaching here, and, call me. Okay. All right. Now we were going over the 10 common cognitive distortions or thinking errors. Cognitive behavioral therapy is dealing with thinking and practice. Cognitive, thinking, behavior, practice. And that's how we change. It's not what happens to you in life. It's what you think about it. It's what that means to you. It's how you interpret that. And in the course of life, and in the course of getting trauma and the things that happen to us, our thinking can become distorted and twisted. And that doesn't mean that we have mental illness, although mental illness is a real thing, but it means we're human. Okay, so I think we left off on emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is what you feel. What you feel. And too often, and I know that I used to do this, and sometimes I still do this, and I have to catch myself and think it through. Because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that that's true. Doesn't mean that that's true. And oftentimes, something can happen to us that reminds us of something that happened in the past. We may not even be, consciously aware of it, but because it reminds us of something that happened in the past, we react to it. And we think, well, this is how I feel, this is how it must be. That's not true. That could be reacting to old trauma. Okay? Does that make sense?
I think that's the one I read, that part of the book where it says to step away. Gather yourself.
Yep, and think it through. Now, where this seems to be, where this hits me most is like in the middle of the night. When I'm under a lot of stress, I have a hard time getting to sleep, I have a hard time staying asleep. But when I'm under lots of stress, I wake up like 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm just laying there in the dark. I'm still tired, but I can't sleep. And the things that I'm worried about are going through my mind, And it's usually not one thing. It's several little things. And I have to stop and focus on one thing at a time and think it through. Now, is what I'm fearing really likely to happen? The worst case, because that's what you kind of imagine when you're letting your fears run away with you. Is that really likely? No. In the past, when I felt this way, how did that work out? Did the sky fall? No, it didn't. And so think through using logic, using reason, using your past experience. Did that really happen? No. And then focus on the next one. And focus on the next one. And you can get through it. When you encounter those I've used the example several times of the young lady that was sexually assaulted in her shower. And so she had this fear of porcelain, I guess. She had this fear of showers and bathtubs. She just couldn't bring herself to go in there. She'd have a panic attack. And the color red would really freak her out. She couldn't be in here. She'd come in here and she'd see this red and it would just make her stomach clench up and go into knots and she wouldn't really know why. And so that would be harmless reminders. Is there anything that's really scary about the color red? No, not really. What's that?
It's in my bank.
Oh, that's in the back.
But no.
Yeah, or a bathtub or showers or anything that, are you going to die if you take a shower? No, you're not. You know? And so, thinking through these things and facing them. Another big one, just by way of reminder, is catastrophizing. Give me an example of catastrophizing. What does it mean to catastrophize?
Make a mountain out of a molehill.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is blowing these things out of proportion. You guys ever do that? I do. I've done that my whole life. Yeah. And I think part of it is people that are pessimistic. You have the optimists go through life, and you have the pessimist. I'm a pessimist. And I used to think pessimists, they were realists. Not really. You kind of go in with your guard up, and you don't expect good things happen, so you're not going to be disappointed. Yeah. So Mark Twain, at the end of his life, said, "I'm an old man, and I've lived through many terrible things, some of which actually happened." How can you live through many terrible things? With some of that, because, in your mind, you get so, I do this, get so worked up and thinking, what about this, what about this, what about this? And then I actually go through the thing that I was so worked up about, and I go, man.
So you're an overthinker?
Yes. Yep. And that's one of the thinking errors, put myself through all that for nothing.
My best friend in Colorado did that to himself in class.
He
Had a paper that was due, and now I'm going to fail. And he even wrote the instructor a note. I gave it my best, but I know you understand. You have to do what you got to do. He got my A.
Yeah.
Just like I told you, you're very intelligent. You're going to be fine. And basically,
But, he nearly sabotaged himself.
yeah.
You know.
And that's what I
By
tell him.
not-
Don't second guess yourself. I
by-
said, just
by
second
not
guess
trying.
yourself too much. You're really intelligent. You hit the books. You study. You're fine.
Yeah. And, so what if you failed?
That's what I tell them. And if you do, so what?
You learn from them, and you're better off for it.
Yeah, but can you really handle it like that? See, I can. I don't care. But too much for me, I withdraw. Or if I got that
Yeah.
love. But he's
Well,
like, no.
A lot of times people who have these fears, they avoid getting into those areas where they might fail. They avoid them, and they avoid them, and they avoid them. And they let their fears run away with them. And so thinking through logically, practically, recognizing some of these things, these fears in our gut, emotional reasoning. Let's go on to number 8, moralizing. Trying to motivate yourself or others with shoulds and shouldn'ts, as if people have to feel bad before they will do anything. Must, ought, have to, need to, and are supposed to are all also moralizations. The emotional consequence of moralizing about yourself is guilt. When you moralize about others, you feel anger, frustration, and resentment. Okay, now, as Christians, shouldn't do that with. Okay, for example, one of the things I notice in the Asian community, I lived in Hawaii for 8 years. Hawaii is more Asian than it is Polynesian. A lot more Asian people there than Polynesian. Been to Japan 8 times. My son lives in Japan. I spent a year in Korea. I spent 5 months in the Philippines. And I have an interest in that culture. And I'm a pastor of a Chinese church. They are very much, you shouldn't. If you don't get a good grade, it's the end of the world, you know. Things like that, they make up should and should nots that are cultural, but aren't scriptural. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, like in my background, in Mike's background, you know, we're both soldiers. When I was an infantryman, if you didn't have your combat instruments badge or your expert instruments badge, or if you weren't a ranger or you weren't special forces, then you were a dud, there was something wrong with you, you didn't make it. Well, ultimately, does it really matter? You know, I mean, I know as students we really strive for an A or an A+. But if you got a B, is it the end of the world? Or how about this one? This is a better one. How long should it take you to get your bachelor's degree?
World terms, 4 years.
4 years? 4, maybe 5. But once you graduate, it took me about 10. I did internships. I didn't like school anyway. Took internships, took breaks. Part of that time I was in the Army. I ended up finishing with Liberty University while I was in active duty in the Army. So it took me longer. I didn't have any school debt, which is good, but it took me longer. But does anybody ever ask me, hey Steve, how long did it take you to get your bachelor's degree? No, never. But I do meet people that really get, well, I won't graduate in 4 years. So what? Does it really matter? No.
So as long as you get there.
So there's this pressure that we put on us, or we allow others to put on us, expectations, which we get so worked up about, which we shouldn't buy into that. Does it really matter? Or I'm doing a wedding on Sunday. How big a wedding should you have? Does it really matter? You know? Should you go in debt to have this big wedding? Why should you go in this couple is not, but going $10,000 into debt to have this big showy wedding? I mean, what's the point of that? You know, you're trying to show off, but then you're going to be in debt. And the number one thing that destroys marriages is finances. That's the number one reason for divorce 6 times over. Financial problems.
6 times over.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that go into that. Your decision making. You know, how do you make decisions? How do you argue? How do you prioritize? Things like that.
I have a question for you. When it says when you moralize about others, you feel anger, frustration, and resentment.
If they're not living up to your expectations,
And I'm trying to apply this towards how because I feel all those three. It's my nephew. I feel like it's. So when I sit around all day, I feel anger, frustration, and resentment. Because I'm not here busting my butt, I'm here to disagree.
yeah,
So is that moralization as well?
it could be. It could be. But is it okay for him to lay around and be lazy and dishonest? And, no, it's not. If my kids did that, I'd have a problem with that, you know. I think you have a problem with that when you love someone. But there are some of these expectations that people put on us, and oh man, that we put on ourselves, that we cause ourselves a lot of unnecessary stress. Moralizing.
So guilty whenever
Sure.
it goes like
Now,
that.
we, as Christians, it's different for us because we do believe in a moral code. We do believe in commandments. Are we under the Old Testament law? No. Christ completed that. But those commandments are restated in the New Testament. 9 of the 10 in stone are restated in the New Testament. Which is the one that's not? No, that's restated. The Sabbath. The Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday. When we worship on Sunday, that's not the Sabbath. That's not a Christian Sabbath. No, the Sabbath is Saturday. We're never commanded to worship on a particular day. Now, the reason the church started worshiping on Sunday traditionally is because of the resurrection. The reason that Jews worship on the Sabbath is because it was in remembrance of the creation.
So their work week is Sunday to Friday.
Yeah. And Saturday was their day of rest. The first day of the week, we always kind of think of it as Monday. No, it's not. It's Sunday. First day of the week is Sunday. So, say you're in a country that doesn't have a Christian tradition at all, like China, and so people work on Sunday just like it's any other day, you know. Say the church could get together on Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday, but they couldn't do it on Sunday. Would it be okay for them to get together on one of those other days? Yes, as long as they get together. And I think you could make a strong case for getting together weekly. You're to worship weekly.
So doing it Sunday or Saturday, would we be ballistic if I were to insist that only Saturday and Saturday is not the appropriate day?
But no, see, we're not under that command. We're not under that. That's part of the Old Testament law. Yeah. Now, we do keep commandments, but they're restated in the New Testament. Okay. So we, when it comes to moralizing, some of the things that we moralize in church that aren't commandments. Yesterday, when I was leaving church, I went outside and I bumped into two of the guys from the church that were smoking cigarettes. Well, they were embarrassed, sort of busted by the pastor, but I don't judge people for that. I don't think it's good for them. I don't think it's good for their health, but nowhere in the Bible does it say, don't smoke. Well, your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit, right? I've heard some pretty fat pastors say that. Yeah, I remember this. I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and we were at a church, local church, and there's this big, had red hair and freckles, and boy, he was a big old fat country boy, a big old belly. And he talked about your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit, and don't smoke and don't drink and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, as an arrogant young infantryman, thinking, how about exercising, Pastor? I didn't tell him that, but
But
you
you
know,
thought,
you need to exercise that temple a little more, buddy. You know? Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to number 9.
we're on rationalization.
Rationalization. Making an excuse for why you did or didn't do something rather than just saying, I did it or I didn't do it. Rationalizations often involve convoluted explanations of your behavior and are intended, often not consciously, to distract yourself or someone else from a much more simple reality. So feeling like we have to make excuses.
So how do you get them to face reality?
Well, I would say confront them and, you know, tell them it's okay. You know, you failed at that, or you didn't do that. That's okay. And where I would need to do this isn't with other people so much, it's with myself. The worst person I've ever met in my life who's done me the most harm has been Steve Holland. Yeah. So I would, you know, if I failed at something, just say, well, you know, I failed at that. And I'll do better next time. Or, that's it. You know, you're human. One thing that helps me to get through this particular thinking error is to try to judge myself the way I would judge other people. I hold myself to a standard much higher than I hold myself to anybody else, and really an unfair standard. You know, I would give somebody else the benefit of the doubt, whereas I almost never give myself the benefit of the doubt. I would allow them to be human, like, well, so what if they fail? Big deal, you know. Does it really matter? No. Or if, let's see, would somebody even notice? Like, say I didn't wear a tie on Sunday or something. Would somebody even know? No, they wouldn't. You know. Okay. And I try to think of myself as how I was when I was a child. You know, would I give myself a break? And you guys need to give yourself a break. So rationalizations. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. We're usually much more tolerant of that with other people. It's okay. It's okay. All right, number 10. Personalization. Seeing yourself as being the cause of some negative external event or being at the center of some event when in fact the event just happened when you were around, as you were not the cause and only had some minor role in causing it. So it's all your fault. You feel like that? You take that responsibility that really isn't all on you. Yeah. These last several, especially personalization, rationalization, is give yourself a break. Now, does that mean, you know, you should be a slacker? No. But you can be so focused and so nervous and you're just killing yourself. And how does that honor the Lord? It doesn't. Okay. All right, any questions? Are there any of these, you know, from the whole list of 10, any of them that really jump out at you, one that you know that, and I do that? Any of those that really click with you?
I think it's more like, I always feel like I have to do more, you know, at least for me.
So you feel like you have to do more, but how much is enough?
I have no idea until everybody's good.
It will never be enough.
But, you know, if you feel like you have to do that until you're worthy, until you're okay, until you're acceptable, until God accepts you, you run yourself into the ground. was the Navy SEAL and the Airborne Ranger and the commissioned officer and
All for naught?
well, I don't know whatever happened to him.
Yeah.
I lost track of him. In the Army, everybody's always moving all the time anyway. He went to the Ranger Regiment, and I went to Hawaii, and I haven't been able to find him on Facebook. That was back in 2006, so Facebook really wasn't off the ground by then. And I've tried to find him since, but I haven't been able to. But I always kind of wondered about him. At what point did he realize, you know what, it's okay to fail? If I don't meet this next goal, it's okay. But while he was working toward that goal, he could focus on that. But once he had attained it, and I feel
Unrealistic expectations.
I feel bad again. And he was always trying to do that and push himself because he didn't want to be like his father. Because his father killed himself. And he didn't want to feel like him. Didn't want to be like his dad. But at some point, you're human, and it's not going to be enough. And what do you do when you finally reach, at least in our profession, the end of it? Say he only makes it to colonel. He's a full bird colonel, and he doesn't make it to general. Does that mean he's a failure? I've known some officers that thought that about themselves. At what point? Do we accept ourselves? All right, let's see. Okay, we're out of time. So start reading on the next book on solution-focused counseling.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Start thinking through solution-focused counseling.
I have to say, this one was a little trying for me. I was bored at times.
Yep.
I thought the exercises were fantastic.
Yeah,
Role
and
playing.
it is a little more technical. There's a video that I could show you by Insoo Berg, who is one of the founders of Solution Focused, where she's talking to a client and you can actually see her using his techniques. But I think it would be better if you look for that on YouTube or something like that, where you can see these techniques being used, because our class time is so limited. We only have an hour. And it does kind of draw it. I think we can talk about it in class, and you can get a handle on it.
Yeah, I like it.
Now I use those two theories most: cognitive behavioral therapy and solution focused, and then John Gottman.